Good morning, friends. If you would, please open to Genesis chapter 11. Genesis 11. Very grateful for your presence and your faith that brings you out this morning. And we're very delighted to have the visitors we do. You're a blessing. But it's always a rich privilege to see you, brethren. Appreciate you very, very much. In Genesis chapter 11, I begin reading in verse 1, where it says, "The whole earth had one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.' But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, 'Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down, and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech.' So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth." What an account when you think of this. And we understand that this is in the aftermath of the flood, and Noah and his family have come out of the ark, and they're beginning to populate the earth, and their descendants are populating the earth. But then you have this episode of where the people decide that they're going to build this city, this tower, and make a name for themselves, and to defy really what God had said to them. They were all speaking the same language. That was the original language God gave mankind in the garden. There's no telling what that language was, but it was just one. And because of that, God saw that the people were beginning to rebel against Him once more. And it was a rebellion in a sense because God had given the command for them to go and replenish the earth. That He wanted this world populated, and He wanted people to spread out. But here we see that they decided to build this city, and especially this tower, to defy God. And so God decided that had to stop. That they had to stop doing this because of His command to go out and multiply the earth. And so in order to appreciate what was happening here, we need to remember God's will for them, which was, of course, to go out and to repopulate the earth. But for whatever reason, they decided to defy God. It could be that they were thinking that they were going to avoid this flood if it happens again, because they'll be prepared this time. They'll have a tower to protect themselves. Whatever their reasoning, God decided to come down. And what that simply means is He decided to act in judgment against the people. That's what He was doing. He decided to do something about it. He had been patient long enough, and now He decided to judge them in the sense of confusing their languages, of implementing different languages. What a God we serve. What a God we serve who has the ability to make people fluent in new languages and be able to communicate in new languages. Profound God we serve. But here we see that He did this because they were rebelling against Him once more. And He said its name is called Babel, or I was taught Babel, so we're going to say Babel this morning, Tower of Babel. But that's what happened here. We see that from the Tower of Babel, certain things occurred that are just so true for us even to this day. Wonderful lessons that God was teaching through this account that we can benefit from even to this day. What can we see? Well, for one, every race came from there. We see that Noah and his family were repopulating the earth, and we all came from them. I know in a technical sense we all come from Adam and Eve, but really we all come from Noah and his family because life started over through them. And we all go back to one of his three sons or some combination of their ancestors, their descendants, I'm saying. That we all descend from them in some combination of them. That we all come from this family. And what we see is that God is the God who has made everybody. In Genesis chapter 9, it says this in verses 18 and 19, that the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. And it says in chapter 10 and verse 32, these were the families of the sons of Noah according to their generations and their nations. And from these the nations were divided on the earth after the flood. So we all go back to that boat, one way or the other. That our ancestors were on that boat. And like I said, their descendants and combinations of their descendants is what has created all of mankind. Now when you see that, and when you consider that, we need to remember that we're all of great value to God. We all have been made of one blood, as it talks about in Acts 17 and verse 26. All nations were made from one blood, the human race. And it really just does a good way of leveling things out. When you consider the fact that we all go back to that boat, in a sense, that we're all one. We're all equal. And that not one is more dominant than the other. Again, I don't know what language they were speaking, but it wasn't English. I know that much because that's a fairly new language compared to history, and it's still evolving. But whatever they spoke in a way, and God confused all of that, and from that we see that all these different nations and all these different people descended from this family. And so again, that should remind us that we're all equal. We're all one blood and one creation from God. But I think it's also important to know that the world had knowledge of God. That's what's so fascinating about this. God is the one who sent them out. God's the one who dispersed them throughout the world. And there was a time when everybody in the world knew this. Everyone in the world knew God, knew about God, and knew about the account that God had done for mankind. And a good way of seeing this, of course, is through history and through the records we have. Now, we understand that the Bible, the first 5 books were written by Moses. Okay, he's the one who was given inspiration to give insight into creation, to the flood, to the Tower of Babel, so on and so forth, and everything found in the first 5 books of the Bible. Exodus 24 and verse 4 says he wrote by inspiration these books. But what's interesting is that when you look in the Bible and you hear about the story of creation, which was first penned by Moses, we have languages that predate Moses, especially that of the ancient Chinese text. That goes back 1,100 years before Moses existed. And what's interesting is when you go back to that language and you see the images used within that language to define that language, you have ideas and concepts that were present in the world that were not even yet recorded by Moses over 1,000 years later. So how did they get knowledge of these events that are found eventually in the Bible? How did they have access to this knowledge? You consider the fact, when you go back and look at this language, where it says, again, they all had one language in chapter 11, and they said, come and let us make bricks and build this tower. And yet you look at the Chinese word for tower, it's made up of a combination of images and words from dust plus grass plus people plus one plus mouth. Now think about that. If you were going to depict a tower in a language, would you even come close to thinking about this? Would you even come close to summarizing the concept of a tower by people plus grass or bricks, making bricks and dust and asphalt and one mouth? How in the world do you combine that and come up with a tower? But we understand the only reason this makes sense in this language that was already in the world before Moses came on the scene was because these were people who had access to this knowledge from their descendants, their ancestors coming out of the ark. You keep looking at this language. For instance, desire is the image made up of the woman plus trees. Well, how in the world do you get that? Where do you get desire from in a woman and trees? The only reason that makes sense is with Eve and the temptation in the garden. Again, over 1,000 years it was in this world before Moses got here. The devil is described as the image of secret plus person plus garden. If I was going to try and describe the devil, I don't know if I would come up with that definition of the garden and the secret person. Or I've always thought this was just so fascinating. The image in the Chinese language for a large boat is 8 plus mouth plus vessel. 8 plus mouth plus vessel. These people were already thinking of a large boat by remembering 8 people in a vessel. Tremendous thought. Or you think about how total, the term total, is made up of the figure together plus earth plus 8. And that would be total from coming out of the ark in humanity. Tremendous, tremendous thought. Or you keep going, and the flood would be total plus water. All of the earth plus water. What it shows us is that there was a time when everybody in the world knew about creation. Everybody in the world knew about the flood. Everybody in the world knew about these stories that were told them from those who came out of the boat, from those who came out of the ark, because they had such awareness of these events. And this again reminds us that we are here by our God. We have all been made by God. Isaiah chapter 40 says, "Why do you say," in verse 27, O Jacob, "and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable." And he is. I mean, he really is. To think that he is able to come up with all these different languages just like that. And people are able to understand the sentence structures in those languages and how to communicate in those languages or how to express ideas in these figures. How in the world can man do that? And how can God even think of that and then to immediately speak it into existence with all these people to, of course, prevent them from continuing to rebel, but then to just to implement this ability? It's tremendous. And you can see even when he inspires the people in the New Testament to speak in tongues, able to speak in languages they never studied or never learned on their own immediately. What a God we serve. What a God we serve who could even figure out this stuff and then to install it just like that. But he did that because, of course, he is our powerful creator. I believe when you look at the Tower of Babel, what you see is an age-old problem of man finding ways to forget God. We understand he scattered them is what happened. Now, the one thing they wanted was to avoid being scattered. In verse 4, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in heaven, let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. Perhaps they were thinking, okay, if God ever gets this notion again to flood the earth, we're going to be ready with this tower, even though God had promised never to flood the earth again. Whatever they're thinking of trying to build this structure in defiance of God, we see that it did not work because God still dispersed them in verse 8. But see, they had not learned from the past. They had heard about the stories of creation and the garden and all those people before the flood, and yet they failed to see the very lesson God was teaching. That the Lord in Genesis 6 and verse 5 saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. They did not learn. And that is a problem that continues to this day. Men find ways to forget God. We find ways to avoid thinking about God and not being mindful of our Creator and how we live by His mercy. We're just so distracted. Psalm 106. It wasn't just the people coming out of the ark in the Tower of Babel. It says even Israel in Psalm 106 verses 13 and 14, they soon forgot His works. They did not wait for His counsel, but lusted exceedingly in the wilderness and tested God in the desert. One of the problems we will always have as humanity is the idea of being distracted from God, dismissing God, forgetting God. And it's a problem that is going to continue to result in the same problems we've always had. We read about in the Old Testament how the people of God forsook Him for idols. And we look at that and we think, how could you possibly leave a God who had proven Himself over and over to serve this worthless man-made concept in an idol? But we're no different. We're no different. We can still look at this world and think of things that men have come up with and put all this value on these things, and especially in comparison to God. Today, if a person can take a ball and move it down the field, or throw it so far, or do something special with a ball, we'll give you millions upon millions to have this lavish lifestyle for a ball, for a game, for a competition that man has come up with, and will pay you in things called money that we've come up with. These things only have value because man places value on them. And we're just so caught up in this world as people that we're so focused on this world and its enticements and its pursuits that we forget God. It's the same thing. Man has always struggled with forgetting God. And as a result, we are distracted. Distracted from what? Distracted that we came from that boat. Distracted that we came from that garden. Distracted that we are here by God. He's the reason we're here. That's the only reason we're here, is for God. We forget that and we're not paying attention. And as a result, we are consumed. We're continuing to practice the same things they did. I remember when I was much, much younger, got off the bus. We lived in the country. And got off the bus and I was walking down our gravel driveway. And we had these deep ditches there in Texas. And I'm walking and my mom says, she yells out the door, she says, go back and get the mail. So I turn around and I go back to the mailbox. I get the mail and I'm coming back. And there in the middle of the driveway, and I had already walked by this thing, was a water moccasin that was coiled up. It was right there. And needless to say, I did not take the same path back to the house. But I had walked by it. I walked right by the thing. And was right there, and I just didn't see it because I wasn't looking for it. But now, If I ever go back to Texas, I'm always looking. I'm always aware of my environment in the country. We're so distracted. Entertainment, news. You realize news distracts us? News is to get us to focus on this world and this alone for the most part. We pursue different knowledges. We pursue different inventions and technology. And all of it gets us away from God, thinking only of this world and forgetting our Creator. Man has always had the problem of forgetting God, and that leads us to another point, and that is there is nothing new under the sun. That's what Solomon said. That he said that you can take this world in all of its pursuits, and there is nothing new. Can you say, see, this is new? It's already been that way in ancient times before us, is what he says. And I've always struggled with that, thinking, okay, well, they didn't have the telephone. They didn't have the automobile. They didn't have things that are not yet invented that are going to be new. So how can you say, see, this is new? How can you say that there's nothing new under the sun? And what he's getting at is the thinking behind these things. That's what he's getting at. The pursuit, the reason for these things. That we're always going to be pursuing these things to find significance and fulfillment, and that drive and the response to this world is nothing new. That's what he's saying. That all of the experiences of humanity are already done. That they've already been experienced before in people trying to find importance, especially apart from God. Any new gadget we get is eventually going to be outdated because man has this desire for something else, pursuing something else, different beliefs and different hopes in response to things. And what we see is it's just not here. People have been trying this since day one, of trying to find fulfillment in this world, especially apart from God. And it just doesn't happen. Solomon is saying in Ecclesiastes, look, I've tested all this. He said, look, I myself built stuff. I made my works great, Ecclesiastes 2. I built myself houses and planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards. I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. In other words, he's saying, look, I tried to build stuff here to make me feel important. I tried to build stuff here to see if I had more of this world assembled the way I wanted, that I would finally feel complete and whole. He said, it's not there. He said, I did things that you will never be able to do. I excelled in this. In verse 9, I became great, chapter 2. I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. This was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. It's the same old thing. If I had just a little bit more, if I accomplished just a little bit more, I'll finally be happy. I'll finally be whole. And he's saying it can't happen. For one, you cannot be satisfied by this world. But for another reason is you can't keep this world. That's what he goes on to talk about, the frustration of all this, in that he had to leave it behind. He says in verse 15, I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me, and why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity, for there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. You know what's going to happen when you pass? when you leave this world, life is going to happen. Life is going to go on without you and without me. And it's going to come to all of us, he says. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are, you're going to leave this world. The wise man and the fool, they both leave empty-handed. And so he says in verse 17, I hated my life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For all is vanity and grasping for the wind. And I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor in which I have toiled, in which I had showed myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. And that's true. You see it all the time. A man and a wife, possibly, they show wisdom in applying themselves to provide for themselves, to bless their family. It happens all the time. And then when that person dies or that couple dies, eventually that family or their descendants squander all that was gained and all that was accumulated through those people's wisdom. And that's what Solomon is saying. Look, what's so frustrated about all this stuff is that it doesn't satisfy. But furthermore, I have to leave it to somebody else who didn't apply themselves the way I did in acquiring these things. That's vain. It's like trying to grab wind. It's purposeless. It's hopeless. And what he's trying to describe is a lesson that God tried to get us to see even in the Tower of Babel. That people who try to make a name for themselves, as they were doing in the tower, trying to find importance apart from God, significance apart from God, the result is always the same. There are people not yet born who are going to have to learn this lesson. That it's not here. It's not here. If this thing continues for another 1,000 years, it's always going to result in that lesson. It's not here. And if we try to make this world our God, we will be disappointed. Why? Because we are spiritual creatures made in the image of God. And the only thing that will satisfy us is God. He's the only thing, the only reason that will give us purpose and significance. And that's what Solomon found out. Solomon tested this world. He tested it at a level that we could only dream of. And he's saying, look, I've looked under every crevice, every corner, every leaf, every project. I went through it all. And I had a bunch of gold coming into me day after day after day. I had all the riches of the world flowing to me. And yet I'm telling you, it's not here. It is not here. The only thing that will make you whole is your relationship with God. That's it. In Ecclesiastes 12, he says in verses 13 and 14, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. You see, we can see that way back in Genesis 11. We see the valuable lesson. We're here from God. The only reason we're here is because of God. We have a God who is very powerful, who's very wise, who's very patient, who's holy, and He's going to hold us accountable for the life He's given us. But despite all that, people still forget God. We focus on our pursuits, we focus on our entertainment, we focus on our knowledge, and we forget God. But it's going to be repeated as long as time continues. Men are always going to repeat these same mistakes of trying to find a life of significance apart from God. May He give us wisdom. And I hope that these thoughts can remind us the reason you are here and the reason you should get up every day is your God. And that's it. That's why you were made. And may He help us see that. It could be that you're here and not a child of God. We want you to be ready to meet our God. And ready to answer for your life. And the only way you can do that is through the blood of Jesus Christ. And so if you understand that, you need to come in contact with the blood. And the only way you can do that is by obeying His gospel. If you're ready to make that confession and to turn away from sin, will you be buried with Him in baptism and raised to walk in newness of life? Or if you've done some things that need to be corrected in a public way, please respond to Him as we stand.